In this final chapter, the authors introduce several key concepts in campaign evaluation, including the various phases during which one may conduct these evaluations, the type of information that one might collect, and how and when one will collect this information. They then discuss key considerations in developing one's evaluation plans and ultimate report of campaign activities and outcomes. Evaluation is the systematic research process used to understand the effectiveness of a campaign. A campaign should always be evaluated in terms of its ratio of inputs, that is, resource used, versus outputs, which is change generated. Now, what are the reasons to conduct an evaluation? Campaign evaluations are important for many reasons, the most integral of which being that organizational resources should not be wasted on messages that are not impacting your target audience. Other reasons include funding, resources, morale, stakeholder support, new opportunities, and to improve. Now, to conduct research using the scientific method is to go through a process of conducting research that is used to test research questions and hypotheses. The following steps were adapted from Joanne Keaton 2011 and can be used to approach conducting research at any stage or for any purpose in strategic communication campaign evaluation. So first off, you start with a question that interests you. Formulate a hypothesis. Now, a hypothesis is an educated guess about the relationship between two or more variables. It is generally a short statement. The hypothesis is the driving force of the research study. A research question asks about potential relationships or concepts in a particular context. Next, you design and conduct measurement, analyze the data, and then develop conclusions and contribute new knowledge. This is perhaps the most important step. Without reflecting on our findings critically, there is little point to conducting research. The steps of the scientific method are not linear. One study builds upon the next, resulting in a never-ending cycle of research on human communication behavior. Now let us consider the three phases of campaign evaluation. The information that is collected can be broadly defined as formative, process, and summative research. Each of these cycles will provide critically important information before, during, and after your campaign's implementation. So let's first look at before the campaign, where we conduct formative research. Formative research is conducted to understand the issues facing your target audience, to understand how and when to best reach them, and develop preliminary understandings of how they will react to campaign activities. Formative research refers to any research conducted before your campaign is implemented. Formative research can also be used after messages have been developed. This is also referred to as post-production research. Research that exposes target audiences to potential campaign messages and assesses their reaction is helpful for creating clear, appealing, and appropriate messages. Now, there are four types of formative research. The four most commonly discussed types of formative research are, first, baseline assessments. This refers to the information you collected on your target audience's current buying behaviors, attitudes, or levels of awareness at the beginning of the process. These same pieces of information will be helpful in knowing if your communication efforts actually made an impact. The second type is developmental research and concept testing. Concept testing is when you present your target audience with initial concepts for the visual and verbal messages of your campaign and ask for feedback. This feedback is then incorporated into the development of complete messages, which are used in the pre-testing stage discussed below. So the third type is pre-testing. In pre-testing, you are seeking to assess critical questions in the development and refinement of your messages, including questions about target audience, reception of the message, so referring to how the message was received, and subsequently the comprehension, which was how the message was understood, and finally the response, which is what effect did the message have. The fourth type is pilot testing. A pilot test is a small-scale implementation of your larger campaign. Pilot testing can also be used to assess the utility of the measurement instruments you intend to use in your evaluation plan. Next, let's look at what we'll do during the campaign, which is the conduct process research. The second phase of evaluation research is conducted while your campaign is being implemented. Process research refers to the assessment of ongoing campaign activities. Part of process evaluation includes keeping a record of campaign activities, including the number of people reached through various communication channels, target audience interaction with the product, and initial indicators of change in attitudes or behaviors. In advertising campaigns, this process research is sometimes referred to as tracking an ongoing campaign. Process research is also key to ensuring that organizational campaign activities stay consistent with the budget and timeline. Conducting process research is an important aspect of developing your campaign evaluation and implementation plans. It provides a means of whether your campaign is headed on a path to achieving its objectives. After the campaign, you might want to conduct summative research. Summative research is the final phase. Summative research refers to any research conducted following the conclusion of a campaign or a campaign cycle. Summative research requires careful planning. Despite being the evaluation at the end of the campaign process, it should be outlined in the beginning of your planning. In strategic communication campaigns, summative research will include assessments of both outcomes and impact. So, when we look at summative research in terms of outcomes evaluation, the first and most obvious phase of summative research is the data that has been collected to examine if the campaign met its intended objectives. Outcome evaluation concerns the effects that directly result from your campaign and whether your campaign achieved what it intended to do. Typical intended effects include changes in knowledge and awareness, beliefs, and behavior. It is typically measured at the individual level. When we think about impact evaluation of summative research, it is actually much more complex than outcome evaluation. An impact evaluation assesses the long-term effects of the campaign on the target audience and its overall process toward larger campaign goals. An impact evaluation is often more appropriate to conduct for an established or repeated campaign. Impact evaluation includes assessments of community or society-wide changes that have occurred as a result of campaign efforts. There are 5 considerations in creating an evaluation plan. First, consider your objectives. The objectives of your campaign will be a crucial guide to understanding your campaign's successes and failures. Recall the development of the SMART objectives in Chapter 5. Following these steps will certainly facilitate the evaluation process. Next, decide what to measure. Measuring objectives and the outcomes related to them is not the only aspect of campaigns that should be evaluated. A more comprehensive scan of the campaign environment is often needed to determine issues related to the campaign and all aspects of the environment affected by campaign activities. We might also consider using a logic model. A logic model is a visual way to present how your resources, campaign activities, and messages and intended outcomes are related. It can include theoretical constructs, or it can be developed without a theory if one is not being used. Ideally, a logic model will connect the theoretical framework to these activities, and in turn the outcomes that will be affected. A logic model therefore consists of 5 key components. Inputs. Inputs include all of the resources that your organization has to direct toward the campaign. Examples include time and money. Activities. Activities are all of the components of the campaign message delivery. Examples include events and advertisements. Third, outputs. Outputs represent how campaign inputs were used. These fall into process research. And fourth, outcomes. Outcomes are the specific changes in your target audience as a result of campaign activities, which can be short-term or long-term. And finally, impact. The impact of a campaign is its broader effect on the goals of the campaign. Thus, the logic model is intended to be read from left to right with an if-then mentality connecting the 5 steps. The logic model will also help in assessing 3 critical pieces of information in campaign assessment. First, campaign effects are any changes in your outcome variables that can be tracked back to your campaign efforts. Second, campaign effectiveness is the extent to which the effects were consistent with previously defined campaign goals and objectives. And third, campaign efficiency concerns the balance of costs and outcomes. Together, assessments of campaign effects, effectiveness, and efficiency comprise the evaluation process. The third consideration is to determine your research design. A research design is the general framework that you will use to answer your research objectives. A research design will dictate how you conduct your campaign assessments, as well as when you conduct them. You may want to consider qualitative and quantitative researches, or the differences between them. Quantitative research refers to results expressed in numerical terms, and qualitative research refers to results expressed in non-numerical terms. Focus groups or interviews on your campaign topic are qualitative in nature. Baseline assessments and statistics that help establish your target audience's level of awareness, knowledge, and behavior prior to campaign activities are quantitative. So when do you collect data? Whether do you do it cross-sectional or longitudinal? Now, a cross-sectional research design measures data at one point in time from a target audience. It allows researchers to quickly examine a subsection of the population. A longitudinal research design involves multiple data collection periods and is typically used to examine changes that appear across those periods of time. It can be very helpful for examining trends in social media, marketing, political climate, or any number of variables that can change often. They can also use longitudinal designs to assess campaign effectiveness. Now, the fourth consideration is to assign measurement responsibilities. As part of an evaluation plan, you must determine who will conduct the evaluations. Focus groups require moderators, and moderators need 1 or 2 moderator assistants who do not conduct the focus group but rather help set up logistics, such as the audio recorders, refreshments, and name tags, so as to facilitate the focus group. Longitudinal surveys are by nature time-consuming and require a long-term commitment from a member of your campaign team. You must also consider if your evaluators will be internal or external to your team. And finally, the fifth consideration is to consider cost of evaluation. Organizations avoid evaluations because of the perceived costs. The costs of campaign evaluation can range from very minimal, even free, to significant. Surveys are rather inexpensive, whereas statistical analysis are more costly. An evaluation report is a written summary of your campaign activities and any evidence of campaign effects, effectiveness, and efficiency. This document will describe any formative process and summative research conducted throughout the course of the campaign's development, implementation, and evaluation. The evaluation report should describe your campaign activities and how they link or did not link to intended outcomes, how your campaign was implemented, and why your campaign should or should not be continued. The creation and dissemination of an evaluation report is an important part of the summative research process. There are a few key considerations that should not be overlooked when writing a report. First, consider your audience. Identify your intended audience in the report, along with what you hope to be the purpose of providing this information. Second, restate mission, goals, and objectives. All of the strategic communication activities that your organization undergoes should be in line with the organization's mission, as well as the long-term goals and short-term objectives of your communication campaign. Third, summarize campaign activities. Clearly state how your effects and effectiveness were measured. The report should include a detailed account of all formative, process, and summative research conducted for your campaign. Fourth, provide and interpret results. A significant part of your report, both in length and emphasis, should be your results and what they mean for your organization. Fifth, use plain language. Plain language is communication that an audience can understand the first time they read or hear it. Sixth, select channels for dissemination. Consider the appropriate and most effective outlet to distribute your evaluation report. The evaluation report might be shared in debriefing meetings, conferences, reports distributed internally or publicly published, and even peer-reviewed journal articles. Seventh, don't forget the nuts and bolts. For example, the abstract, summary, and title page, etc. In sum, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to campaign evaluation. The evaluation process itself is fluid. And remember, there are two key points that you should take away from this chapter. One, the evaluation process for a strategic communication campaign should be carefully planned and structured. And two, your evaluation process should be considered at the beginning of the strategic campaign process.